G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle. In the previous edition, I did a video talking about the knowing your different troops choices, and I mainly zeroed in on tactical squads versus assault squads and which worked better for the legions. This time out, I've dialed that up to 11. We're looking at all of the troops choices here, with the exception of Grey Hunters and Grey Slayers for the Space Wolves. You already know they're good Space Wolves players, you don't need me to talk about them. This is everyone else, including, and especially, the Inductii, because they're a wild card that we need to talk about. So, strap in, it's going to be a longer episode, and before I actually kick it off, you take what is cool in your lists, okay? This is not about picking the best unit to win games, but it is in my sort of self-appointed role of consumer advocacy. What I suggest are the better options, bang for your buck, as it were, based on their tabletop performance. So the list is broken up by colour. The colour denotes whether something is poor, adequate, decent, or excellent. And in the top graphic, that really just means whether they have or don't have a special rule. Again, with the exception of Inductii, we'll talk about them at the end. Also, I do understand that there will be colourblind people out there who can't get full use out of the chart. For that, I apologise, but this is the easiest way I can display it for most people, so therefore it's the one I'm going to go with. Now, the categories. We'll start with the top half of the chart here because this defines everything. So first of all, we have the budget troops choices. This is the average troops that everyone is going to use in most of their games. There's the tactical squad, the despoiler squad, and the assault squad. The premium troops is the breaches. They are in a separate category because they are core troops choices. They're not support unit, but they are more expensive in points and a bit more specialised. Then we have Preemie support. This is just a name that I just came up with then. It's not a very good one, but it's what I'm rolling with for now because it's for premium troops choices because they're expensive, but they're also non-compulsory support unit. That is the Indominus Terminators. Then we have the non-compulsory troops. That's going to be our recon squads, our scout squads, and our tactical support squads. Anyway, then we have down the side here the special rules. So, Heart of the Legion. So, Heart of the Legion it's a special rule that means if you are within range of an objective, you are going to get a buff of some kind from that objective. So, okay, it's neat. That objective buff is typically going to be, well, in fact it is, a Feel No Pain. It's a damage mitigation roll, or a boost to your existing Feel No Pain. It is a 6+, and therefore it means you can boost a 5+ Feel No Pain to a 4+ as well. Now, tactical squads and despoiler squads both get to leverage this special rule. Then we have Spite of the Legion. The only unit that has this is the despoiler squad, and it is a hyper-situational special rule. And essentially, for Spite of the Legion to go off, you need to declare a charge on a unit that is pinned, falling back, or includes no models with the character type or chosen warrior's special rule, and if all of that comes into play, then you get +1 attack when you charge. It is hyper-situational, it's not a very good special rule. Then we have Line. Now, Line applies to all of our core troops choices. That's tacticals, despoilers, assault, and breaches. Line is good. Line means you can actually score objectives. Everyone else, they can just counter scoring on objectives, but they can't score the point themselves. These units can. And whilst objectives are not hyper-critical in current 30k base game, Chthonian missions, objectives are important, and of course, any custom missions that people play where objectives are in play and kill points are not, then again, it's going to be very, very important. Fury of the Legion. Now, Fury of the Legion is double your firepower output. It's a declared ability, and only tactical squads have access to it. This one can scale immensely based on certain legions having certain special traits, but they're the only unit that has this rule. Nobody else does. Then we get the heavy subtype, and that is going to be your breaches and Indominus Terminators. Now, what Heavy's going to do is it's going to allow you to roll your save a second time against blast and template weapons, which is a good thing, with the slight negative drawback of not being able to run, shorter consolidation moves, that sort of thing, reduced movement on the core models. It's not a big deal. The ability to reroll your saves against blast and templates has completely neutered those already awful weapons this edition, so it's actually a really good rule. Makes these units very, very resilient. And in the case of both these units, they have a 5+ invulnerable save baked in, and in the Indomitus, they can even get it up to a 4+ baked in, so quite good for them. Then we start to get a bit more specialized, because you notice the chart, nothing for the non-compulsories happened in the first half of the special rules, and everything happened for the other choices. Well, now it flips, because the Scout, Infiltrate, Skirmish, and Light rules all come into play here. So Scout is a movement boost at the start of the game. So prior to taking the first turn of the game, you get to do a Scout move. It's actually pretty useful, and Recon Marines and Scouts both come with it. Then we have Infiltrate. You can deploy within 12 inches of the enemy if they don't have line of sight to you, or they don't have some other bullcrap item, like augury scanners, the old Jin side, anything like that, okay? Can be useful for getting into a good, an advantageous position on the tabletop. If you are within line of sight, it's reduced to 18 inches, and some units you can't get within 24. Skirmish is going to allow you to have a larger unit coherency, so it means you've become very difficult to hit with blasts and templates. It's a pretty good special rule. And again, Recon Marines and Scouts. Then we have Light. Now, Light is a boost to your run, and Scouts have the Light special rule. And you'll notice Tactical Support Squads have absolutely nothing from here. My personal opinion, they should have Line, but they don't. Anyway, that is the top half of the chart. So everyone knows what these units' stats are and such, so we don't need to go any further into how they play on the tabletop. What we need to talk about now is the legions that they fit into in the bottom half. So, Dark Angels, Tactical Squads are a go, as are Despoiler Squads, Assault Squads, Breaches. They're great with all of them because they have bonuses that work well for all of those units and the weapons they typically carry, because you can pick the different wings of the Hexagamaton to put them in. So, for example, you can take +1 to hit with your bolt weapons on the Tactical Squads. Baked in, if you take the correct wing. You can have the +1 to hit with your sword weapons on the Despoilers or the Assault Squads. They come with sword weapons, basically. So, you're going to get a buff there. Same with Breaches. You can take advantage of a couple of different wings special rules on Breaches. When we get to the other units, though, the buffs become decreased, because they still have them, but, well, Indomitus are probably not going to be rocking power swords, and their shooting's not too great, so you're not going to get a lot out of them there. You're probably going to focus on some of the more mediocre rules. Tactical Support Squads, same sort of thing. You might try Firewing and try and go character sniping, but you got to get so close to really get the most out of them. Recon Marines and Scouts are probably going to be using Nemesis weapons, or they're going to be using shotguns. In either case, though, neither of those weapons will really benefit from anything that these legions bring to the table. So it's neither here nor there. Again, Inductii, we'll talk about at the end. So, Emperor's Children. Now, Emperor's Children's bonus is basically a close combat bonus, and frankly, Tactical Squads and Breaches are not built for close combat. So both of them will lose out on that. Now, they can be made to work in close combat, but then how many points do you want to sink into the least effective units in your army? I mean, least effective in quotation marks, because there are always circumstances like Rights of War which completely change the tone of everything. On the other hand, Despoilers and Assault Squads are going to always get buffs that work in their favour from the Emperor's Children Legion trait without having to spend additional points on the squads. So innately, they are just superior in many ways. Of course, the Indomitus Terminators striking earlier with their weapons, it's a buff to them. And then, again, because it's a close combat buff, Recon Scout, Tactical Squads, Tactical Support Squads, they all suffer in that comparison. Then we get to Iron Warriors. Now, I think Iron Warriors are one of the strongest legions in the game, but it is not for their troops choices. The buff that they get to their shooting against tanks and dreadnoughts, things like that, it's not really going to help the tactical squads. It's not at all going to help the despoilers or the assault squads. I mean, at least tactical squads can Fury of the Legion at strength 5 and, maybe glance a Rhino to death or the side armor on a vehicle or, put enough wounds on a dreadnought that maybe you can make it fail some saves. Despoilers and assault squads are not doing that with their ranged weapons. Their ranged weapons are not very good. So they come off very badly in this comparison. And Recon Marines and Scouts, the things you want to get out of your weapons is you want to be pulling like the rending with the sniper rifles. You don't want to be firing Recon Marines at a Land Raider and going, well, hey, I'm looking for those rending hits. I want to try and pen this Land Raider. It's a gross misuse of the weapons, the unit. And when you're doing that, something else has happened in the game that has dictated that situation, which is probably not ideal. Now, the breaches, again, same boat as the infantry. And in fact, the argument could be made that if you arm them with Volkite charges, then you could be looking actually at quite a decent anti-tank unit here. But again, that might only move them up to the green category. Indominus Terminators, on the other hand, have access to some pretty hard-hitting war gear. Again, they're not the greatest at ranged combat. They are still Terminators. They are restricted to the combi bolters, but they have a few other weapon options in there, like the assault cannon, and they can do damage with it. So, Indominus Iron Warriors, I think, are one of the best troops choices for them. However, as you can see above, not line, not scoring. Recon Marine Scouts, as I said, gain nothing from it. And of course, tactical support squads, well, what do people arm them with? Probably this edition, rotor cannons and melter weapons. They're going to be the big two. Pretty much everything else, Volkite weapons are okay, but why would you pay that many points? And even, let's be honest, the melter guns are way overpriced, points-wise, for what they deliver compared to a heavy support squad. But maybe you filled up your heavy support slots and you're taking tactical support marines, therefore, to get some special weapons into the army. In which case, Iron Warriors, adding +1 strength to a melter gun is going to make it a 2s to wound against dreadnoughts, and if you're in melter range, 2s to wound with a reroll. That's pretty damn good. It's even good on plasma weapons, because you'll be bumping them up in strength. So there's some good abilities in there. Then we get to the White Scars. So, the White Scars. Yeah, this is not a great coloured line. And this is because their buffs are movement-based. And movement is useful. It dictates the battle and allows you to have a lot more versatility in order to win the game. However, 9 times out of 10, the versatility you are gaining is best used on the elite hard-hitting units in your army, not on your tactical squads, which should be sitting locked on an objective, holding it down. Therefore, one has to say, what are they actually getting out of it? Well, the only unit I think really benefits here is the breaches, because it's giving the breaches speed that they otherwise lack. And that's probably it. For the Recon Marines and the Scouts, unless you're arming them with shotguns, which, okay, they're concussive, which is cool, but, well, I mean, Nemesis bolt weapons are so bloody strong, you're probably not going to be running them around the battlefield. So having the extra inch of movement does nothing for these units. So they're really gaining nothing. And the tactical support squads, yeah, they can get around a little bit quicker. Might help them to get into range with their weapons, but again, you're probably going to see rotor cannons trying to pin units being the more common weapon taken on tactical support this edition, especially with the cost in points. And they can move and fire them anyway. It's just they're going to get there slightly faster. I don't think it's worth it. Space Wolves. Space Wolves are very melee-oriented, and therefore, Despoilers assault squads are going to be by far the best choice, as are breaches. Why breaches? Well, because they can actually hold up in close combat. They have very solid shooting in the form of Volkites, which is something that Space Wolves kind of lack a little bit in their infantry. But they're competitive. And in fact, I'm probably being a little bit harsh here on tactical squads in that they might be more of a green troop than a yellow troop. But the bonus to, run and charge and things like that, they have so many good units that you're going to take, like Grey Hunters and Grey Slayers, over them, that it's like, well, is it worth it? Are tacticals worth it? Probably not. If you're going to be using them for their shooting, I'm sure there are other things you could put into the army that can give you equal or better firepower, especially for the points. The spoilers and assault squads, at least they're fast, designed for melee from the get-go, have the weapons that you can put in there to make them better in melee. Don't take heavy chainswords, by the way. You think mauls, power swords, maybe even frost weapons, space wolves. They're all solid choices. And the Indomitus, they lack those abilities because of the fact that, run and charge and heavy and all those interactions are not great for that particular unit. And they are fighting with other better choices in this list. And I really do like breaches in the Space Wolves. I think they are criminally underrated because that 5-up invulnerable save, that resilience, and also the price. And of course, that means that the bonus charge and things like that, Recon Marine Scouts, doesn't really apply super well to them, does it now? And the tactical support squads, well, they're probably going to be close. They're probably going to get involved in a few close combats, so they may get into yellow category. Next up, everyone's favourite, the Imperial Fists. And we're seeing an awful lot of blue here. +1 to hit with all bolt and auto weapons. Although all of their units will make use of this in some way, Despoilers, Assault Squads, Indomitus, the fact remains that you are not taking Despoilers and Assault Squads to shoot bolt pistols at people. That's a misuse of the unit. However, Fury of the Legion bolt guns with +1 on their to hit rolls is amazingly good. Same with the breaches and their bolt guns. It may be a better choice than taking the Volkite charges because you're going to have a very similar damage output without paying the 2 points per model for the charges. Obviously, Recon Marines and Scouts, if you're using Nemesis bolt weapons, 2s to hit with rending 4+, pinning, picking out character models. Yeah, it is broken as sin, so it's pretty good there. And tactical support squads, rotor cannons, pinning rotor cannons, and yeah, it's as good as you think it will be. So really strong across the board for the Imperial Fists, with the Indomitus actually being one of the weaker choices, because yeah, they can take an assault cannon, but well, an assault cannon is not a unique thing in Imperial Fists. It's a common weapon for the Imperial Fists, and storm shields are already very common for them. There are other better choices they can take in troops like Phalanx Warders, if you're taking Stone Gauntlet, for example, or, other more nasty units in general. Then we get to the Night Wards. Now, Night Wards are a curious case here, because the Night Wards, their buffs come from outnumbering. And once you outnumber, the damage numbers go up immensely. And so the units that have made it into the blue with the Night Wards, which is the Assault Squad and the Indomitus, are there because they are bulky units. If you have 5 guys, that's equal to 10 models in another faction. That's huge for outnumbering purposes, and this is going to apply to your shooting and to close combat. Now, Recon Marines and Scouts, they actually are in the yellow, and that may seem odd to people, but do remember, that +1 damaging roll that you're going to make is not going to boost the rending on their Nemesis weapons. It's not going to boost the pinning, anything like that. The Fear might in the Legion, but that again applies to all of the units in the Night Lords. It's not unique to them. And they are likely not going to outnumber their enemies because they are not bulky in any way, shape, or form, and they're usually only taken in squads of 5 or so. So they are actually the lowest ranking units in the Night Lord set here. Tactical support squads, of course, they have solid chance at outnumbering enemy units, because I seem to see a lot of squads of 8. For whatever reason, 8 seems to be a number people like in tactical support. Well, they'll outnumber 5, 6, and of course 7 model units. Not too shabby, and might get them in a position where they can take advantage of it. And of course, tacticals and spoiler squads can be taken in large numbers, even breaches can be taken in solid numbers. So they're all likely going to benefit from this rule in some way. So overall, the Night Lords actually come out of this pretty well on their troops choices. Then we get to Blood Angels. Now, Blood Angels are in a funny place because their buffs are all going to come in melee. Now, certain melee units are better at getting those buffs, namely Assault Squads. They're just faster at getting there to actually get the benefit, that +1 on their to wound rolls. And that is why they edge out the spoilers here. Indominus Terminators also getting that +1 buff can be very handy, thinking of the circumstance where Power Fists or Thunderhammers are on the squad and they're striking at those toughness 7 units, because you're going to go from wounding on 3s to wounding on 2s, and that can make a huge difference when you're fighting something like a Dreadnought. And so I think that's where the Blood Angels really shine. But on breaches, on tactical squads, unless you're arming them with something like chain bayonets, they're not going to see much benefit from it. And of course, recon, scout, tactical support, none of those units should be in close combat in the first place, ideally. So it's all a big red flag for them. What are you doing? Then Iron Hands. And, well, everything is good in Iron Hands because of the +1 buff to your toughness. Well, it's not +1 buff to your toughness. It's a -1 strength modifier to enemy shooting. That is amazing across the board, of course. But some units make better use of this than others. Indominus, Despoilers, and Assault Squads. Well, I mean, Indominus not being instant killed by Strength 8 is great and all, but they're a unit designed to get into close combat. So are Despoilers, so are Assault Squads. Iron Hands are not a close combat army. They have no buffs in there. The best thing you might have in close combat is a Machinator Array on your equivalent of a Praetor, your Iron Father, or you might have a Cyber Familiar on your Squad Sergeants. That's great and all, but you're going up against legions that have +1 weapon skill, or 2 to 3 extra attacks on the charge, rending on all of their weapons on 4+, things like that, okay? Terrifying units out there. And your buffs are all against shooting. So why would close combat units, especially in the troops choices area, be the best choices for Iron Hands? As I said at the start of the video, if you have a theme, by all means gun for it, but that is risky. And of course, Despoilers, Assault Marines, and Indominus are all close combat oriented units, ideally. I mean, most Indominus players are going to be taking them with Thunderhammer and Storm Shield, because Thunderhammers are amazing, Storm Shields are cheap, and you're going to get kind of the best of both worlds of Cataphractii and Tartarus. It's a win-win. And then, of course, your Recon Marines, Scouts, Tactical Support, all units that you want to be shooting and kept safe from shooting are going to be in the blue, as are Tactical Support Squads, because of the amount of firepower they can put out. And Breaches, not just because they can put out firepower, but with the breaching shields, these guys are actually as hard as Terminators to kill, just with slightly less wounds. And if you can get Apothecaries in these units, it is amazing the amount of damage that Iron Hands can soak up. Going from there, we get to the World Eaters, and the World Eaters do not do well. And that is because all they're really bringing to the table is charge bonuses, and the Despoilers fall down here because they are no more likely than the enemy is to get the charge. And against certain legions, like the Space Wolves, you are less likely to get the charge with your Despoilers. And in fact, White Scar's Despoilers are also probably more likely to charge you than you are to charge them. In which case, Assault Marines have the movement to get them there. And Indominus, they have the durability to get themselves there. Breaches have the durability, but they don't have the hitting power. So, the logical two choices for them are here and here. Now, you might think that you should be seeing red across the board for the World Eaters, Tactical Support Squads, Recon Marines, and Scouts. But at the end of the day, those units will have a lot of buffs in close combat. And, okay, you don't need to charge with World Eaters, kind of contrary to what I was just saying, but you want to be charging. You want to be stacking the most attacks possible. You don't just want to be relying on the one attack from your Legion trait. You want to be getting the one attack for charging as well as the one attack for your Legion trait. That means that Recon Marines, Scouts, and Tactical Support can actually throw out an awful lot of attacks if an enemy gets so close that you need to charge them. That is handy to keep in your back pocket if the time is right. And that's why I think World Eaters are an underrated shooting army, because they're a shooting army that if you get close to them, they have enough attacks to throw at you that it can actually put you on the back foot if they're played well. Then Ultramarines. So Ultramarines, of course, you're getting the pseudo-Markalites bonus that we know about from every edition of Heresy. And that, of course, primarily, it is a buff for shooting. And therefore, tactical squads, breaches, and recon scouts tactical support are all benefiting hugely from this. Despoilers, assault squads, and Indomitus are not primarily shooting units, therefore they don't gain a lot of benefit from this. They're not bad at it, they just gain little to no bonus, hence the yellow adequate rating. Thousand Suns. Asphyx rounds, although they have a weird interaction with the Fury of the Legion special rules as written, I prefer to think of it as the Thousand Suns suck completely in this game. They're the worst Legion by 1,000 yards. The Thousand Suns probably should be allowed to play the Asphyx rounds if they've chosen to spend the points per model to upgrade to them. Play it as it's probably intended, which is you can Fury of the Legion with Asphyx rounds. They need all the help they can get on their regular guys in the Thousand Suns, in which case for them and for breaches, it's really good. And tactical support, you can do things like gain buffs for your pinning shots, which is pretty handy, at the risk of a psychic check. You can do the same thing on Recon Marines, but Recon Marines risking blowing up your sergeant and losing probably 1/5 of your firepower, I don't think is a great trade-off for that psychic power. Many of the cults are terrible, but the one circumstance I see working is Tactical Support Squad with rotor cannons getting the +1 pinning. I think that is pretty good. And then the Sons of Horus. So just across the board, the Sons of Horus are going to get a buff that if you basically charge them, or they charge you, they're essentially battle-hardened in that first round. You're -1 strength against them in close combat. That means all of their units are more resilient, which is really, really good for the units that are probably going to get charged. That is units holding objectives, that is units that are going to be moving forward, like Despoilers and Assault Squads and Indomitus and trying to get into close combat with the enemy. The downside here is that you need Apothecaries to take most advantage of this, so the Strength 8 hits that you take, you get Feel No Pain against them. And really where this ability works best is Legion Elite Terminator choices, like Cataphracti, Command Squads, for example, can be really, really tough in Sons of Horus, but overall it's going to make you just a tiny bit tougher on your regular guys and in those niche circumstances. Again, Recon Marines, Scouts, Tactical Support probably shouldn't be getting charged in the first place. I recognise it's going to happen, so like the World Eaters, they make it into the yellow, not the red, even though it is a close combat ability. Then Word Bearers. You're always going to be no worse than Leadership 6. That's great for everyone. It doesn't really help the Indomitus out, though. I mean, I'm being a little bit harsh on the Indomitus because they're getting a leadership buff that all these other units are, but well, if something has gone through your 2+ armor saves, gotten through your 4+ invulnerable saves, at what point are you taking so much damage on the squad that pinning is becoming a real issue for you, morale checks are becoming a real issue for you? I think at that point you're probably starting to lose the game, in which case the buff is getting a bit, a bit questionable. The units that are most likely to be taking repeated morale checks are going to be the Despoilers and Assault Squads, units that are going to get shot as they close distance on the battlefield, and going to lose models in close combat. So they're the ones who are going to benefit the most from this special rule, hence they're both blue. Salamanders. Your Legion sucks. I know because I've played it and it sucks. Your special rule is super niche. -1 to wound you when you're shot with Flamer, Volkite, Plasma, and Melter. It doesn't change the strength on those weapons. They're still instant-kill you in the form of Melter weapons. They're still going to be breaching. They're still going to have the AP they have, so are Plasma weapons. You're still going to get deflagged by Volkite weapons. And Flamers are some of the worst weapons in the game. And no one in their right mind is using Flamers against Salamanders. So why would Salamanders players choose any of these units, you have no good shooting buffs on your tacticals, you have no good assault buffs on your despoilers or assault squads. All you have is a little bit of resilience in breaches, because at least they'll make 5+ invulnerable saves against those hits. Same with the Indomitus Terminators, who can technically take a Salamander's Dragon Scale Storm Shield, but since they can already take a Storm Shield, unless somehow you're going to double shield them, they're getting the same invul save as everyone else's Indomitus. So at least those two units have a chance of surviving against those weapons, because maybe they'll take less initial wounds and they'll get to make an invul save. But apart from that, the Legion sucks. The rules are badly written for them, and I will die on that hill. The Raven Guard. So the Raven Guard. Here we have a Legion that gets basically no buffs from their Legion trait for most of their units. Okay, so the breaches are going to get +1 to wound in close combat. Rerolling the 1s to wound in close combat. That might come in handy sometimes. Your tactical squads can infiltrate. That might come in handy sometimes, Get onto an objective early if it's one of those objectives that ticks up every turn. Okay. The spoiler squads infiltrating, though, that is genuinely useful because you can get closer for close combat. And tactical support squads, you really want to get in close or get into a position where you can leverage your shooting. So it's phenomenal for them. But why are the Legion traits no good for Assault Marines, for Recon Marines, or for Scouts? Well, for Assault Marines, the standard weapon you come with is a Shredding Chainsword, which always rerolls all to wound rolls. And the buff you're getting from the Legion is rerolling 1s to wound. So the Legion trait does absolutely nothing for the unit. Now, if you load up on certain power weapons, like, say, power mauls in the unit, you can take a few of those in Assault Squad, well, then it starts to become useful because you're rerolling the 1s to wound. But let's say you're rolling 8 to wound dice, that might be one reroll you get. It's not an awful lot with those power mauls, so it's not going to be super useful to them. Then you have the Indomitus Terminators. Well, okay, they're going to be able to make use of that rerolling 1s to wound, but you're striking with things like Thunderhammers. How many 1s are you rolling? Okay, there'll be the exceptional time where you roll 8 dice and they're all 1s. Yeah, but the statistical odds of that happening are so low, and this is a unit that wants to get up close and in the action as early as possible in the game. And they're getting no infiltration bonus. And of course, your Recon Marines and your Scouts, well, they already have all the scouting infiltrating rules they could want in the form of their basic core special rules. They get nothing from the Legion trait. So Salamanders and Raven Guard are both Legions who absolutely suck when it comes to transferring Legion traits to their units effectively. Caveat being that, as I've said in episodes talking about the unit power scaling in the game, both those Legions have exceptional units in the form of their elite units, which does mitigate this to some extent, but we're not talking about that today. And lastly, the Alpha Legion. Because their trait means that they count as being 2 inches further away from you when you shoot at them, that means units which favour shooting, i.e. Scouts, Recon Marines specifically, because they already have very long-ranged weapons in the form of Nemesis bolt guns, they predominantly benefit the most here. And then breaches and tactical squads and tactical support squads, they're going to be a bit closer, but at least they'll be able to keep some distance. And despoiler assault squads are benefiting the least because they have to get in close to leverage their abilities. That means that the +2 inches isn't going to be a huge impact a lot of the time. For the Indomitus Terminators, though, they're in a funny category because that extra bit of resilience, coupled with the way reactions work and such, and their reduced charge distances because of the heavy special rule, Indomitus Terminators are really, they're going to benefit more from this 2 inches than the Despoilers or Assault Squads will. So that's why they made it up to the green category. So that's my picks for what units work best with each of these legions. Funny enough, Dark Angels probably benefit from this the most. However, once you start taking hexagamaton-based rites of war, that is going to completely change the chart, the table, what have you, because they force you to take a certain wing, and that means you're not picking an optimum wing most of the time for your troops choices, and it will move them into things like a red box. Keep that in the back of your mind. Also, Indomitus Terminators. The dynamic totally changes when you take Pride of the Legion, because some genius decided that they should be line and they should no longer be support squad. So they become line and they become a compulsory troops choice option in a Pride of the Legion force, which means you can take 4 of them as backups to, or 4 units of them as backups to, say, 2 squads of Cataphracti, which are also scoring. So they, again, completely change the dynamic here, because then why would you take any of these other troops choices when you have that on the board? You're already going, I want an elite Terminator force, that's why I took Pride of the Legion. Yeah, take the Indomitus. They're going to be blue across the board, pretty much. Now, Inductii. So, Inductii up the top, we've got question marks here. Everywhere you see a question mark, that's because it changes from Legion to Legion. So, with that in mind, let's talk about it. Dark Angels. The Dark Angels are a blue. This is rare because the Inductii power scaling is dramatically different across the board. And this is not against the game as a whole, this is against the Legion they're used as a part of. For Dark Angels, you can turn them into Volkite Charger support squads for dirt cheap. 100 points for 10. 200 points for 20. You get line, you get to keep Heart of the Legion. Like, there is almost no downside to taking them. Inductii, in this case, are really, really, really good. So the Dark Angel is just a blue. Okay, yes, there are some better units you can take, but for the points, they're amazing. Emperor's Children. Emperor's Children, they're despoilers, and their despoilers become Inductii, and they can all take charnable weapons. Okay, 5 points a model, not the cheapest in the world, but it's also not that expensive. What's crazy is they replace Heart of the Legion, so getting rid of that, I'm on an objective and I get +1, feel no pain, or 6+ if I don't have one. They're replacing that with Leadership 10 for pinning and morale checks in the shooting phase. Okay. Just remember, when these guys charge, that's going to be 3 breaching 5+ hits per model in the close combat, and you can put things like Sonic Shriekers in there with them. So, yeah, really, really, really strong. Iron Warriors. They tried to give them rules like the last edition's Iron Warriors, I think, because what they did was they replaced Heart of the Legion on their tactical squads with Souls of Iron, which will make you immune to pinning, but they force you to shoot the closest target. This means it's really easy to bait you into shooting stupid things. Like, here's a rhino, good luck. Here's a single bike, good luck. Really, really annoying if you're the Iron Warriors player put into that situation, and I don't think it's worth it. So they're a yellow. They don't really bring much to the table for the Legion. But the immune to pinning thing might be handy on an objective, remembering you're not having characters join the squad, so no Apothecary. White Scars. White Scars are weird here, because they get Proof of Valor instead of Heart of the Legion on their despoilers. It allows them to get a 5+ damage mitigation when fighting enemies which are weapon skill 5, which is kind of useful because it's not feel no pain. It is just a 5+ damage mitigation. You can hit by strength 12 somehow. 5+, do I make it? This will work against Dreadnoughts. You can actually tar pit Dreadnoughts with these guys. That's good. And if they survive the turn without falling back, you actually gain a victory point. Now, I would suggest that this works really, really well with the Sagya Mazan Rite of War, because they won't get the feel no pain bonus out of it, but what they will get is they're not scoring when it comes to kill points. You kill the unit, you don't get a kill point for it, but they can get a kill point for surviving combat with you, and they're going to be fearless. So, yeah, do that. That's really, really good. It's not the greatest options, that's why we make it to a green, but it's decent. Space Wolves. They're despoilers again, and they're Inductii. You get a sergeant who is essentially a normal marine, which is kind of similar to the Salamanders. You get a veteran one, but we'll get there. And you can upgrade the entire squad to have things like combat shields and chain swords can be changed to chain axes. You lose Heart of the Legion, but you get plus 2 inches to your charge range, but have disordered charge if you choose to use that ability. Yeah, it's okay, but it's a yellow. Why is it a yellow? Because you have grey hunters or grey slayers, grey stalkers, like all the grey units in the world, and they're better at everything these guys can do for almost no extra points comparatively. And they're also going to be line, and they're also going to be compulsory troops choices, and they're just better, and they know it. And then Imperial Fists, the Legion that just suffers in this game. They just suck. So many people on pages like, 4chan and whatever go, oh, Imperial Fists are not the best Legion in the Heresy. And this is demonstrated to us by them having multiple blue categories again here. Because their unit is a tactical squad. And this tactical squad, well, what do they get? They get the option to take 1 in 10 models can take a heavy bolter and autocannon. Now, they lose Heart of the Legion, but they gain the ability to, once per game, make that heavy bolter or autocannon pinning. I would suggest it's probably better to take the heavy bolters because you're going to get more shots. And that means more chance of causing a wound that gets pinning to go off against things like other tactical squads. Sure, the autocannon will hit harder. Strength 7, yeah, you can shoot dreadnoughts, I guess. You can shoot light vehicles, I guess. But you're kind of wasting the ability. You're going to hit on 2s. That means you're going to hit most things you fire at in the game on 2s. You are going to wound most Marines on 3s, and therefore, unless it's like Iron Hands. But that means you've got a really good chance of them rolling at least 1 failed save. And therefore, you're probably going to pull off the pinning with this Imperial Fist squad. So having a clutch unit of them isn't actually a terrible choice. In fact, they're fantastic because pinning is really good in a game full of reactions, in a game full of trap cards. I think the Imperial Fist Inductii are therefore rock solid. Then we have Night Lords. So Night Lords, their Inductii are despoiler based. And the idea here is theme. And the theme is on Night Lords that your sergeant is surrounded by a bunch of murderous psychopaths. And these murderous psychopaths may just stab you in the back. Or they may stab their own sergeant in the back. So they replace their chainswords with these silly little breaching 6+ prison shivs or something, and they trade the Heart of the Legion for this unscrupulous murderous special rule. And you basically roll a d6 for up to 2 other Inductii models when your characters are in a challenge, and on a 2+, they do their attacks. They knife essentially the character in the back at initiative of 10 step, but if they roll 1. They knife their own squad sergeant. And remember, you are going to be no greater than leadership 7. Yeah. This squad is not very good. Blood Angels now. Blood Angels, they're really thematic. I like that, but they're not good. They're despoilers who are taken as Inductii, lose Spite of the Legion, which, sucks anyway. But they lose Sweeping Advance. And if they win their first combat and kills everyone involved or makes them run away, they get Fear 1, which they keep for the rest of the game. But they still don't get to sweep for the rest of the game. They've just gained Fear 1. And the niche circumstance where I can see this really working for the Blood Angels is if they were to maybe get that fear-causing unit within range of an enemy unit to just drop their morale a little bit for someone else's shooting. But it's so niche, it's not worth it to me, so they're a yellow. Iron Hands get Tactical Squad, which loses Fury of the Legion, and gains the Heavy Special Rule and Forbidden Augmentations, which is Bionics, essentially. And what these Bionics do is you roll a dice each turn. On a 5-up, you get a buff, and that buff is +1 ballistic skill or weapon skill. On a 1 or a 2, though, you take D3 AP nil wounds. So, it's a 1 in 3 chance to get a buff, but it's a 1 in 3 chance to also take D3 wounds that you only get a 3-up armor save against, because you have no other, buffs, really. Damage mitigation roll, I guess you'll have a 6-up if you're within, 3 inches of an objective. Yay. But you traded in half your firepower to do it. That's not worth it. This is a bad unit. This is a really bad unit. Like, leverage your strengths. Iron Hands have so many buffs against shooting attacks. You're trading all those buffs in for this Inductii squad. That's not worth it. You gain +1 ballistic skill at the cost of half of your shooting. And this is when there are legions like Imperial Fists who just have +1 to hit built into them. It's awful, truly. World Eaters. World Eaters are not completely useless, but they traded in Heart of the Legion for Ravening Madmen on their despoilers. The only time you would use this is to fight a weapon skill 5 unit and to hit them on 3s. You got no war gear to hurt anything useful. Everyone can hit you on 3s regardless, so against a weapon skill 5 unit, at least you're hitting them and they're not hitting you any easier than they would have anyway. You got that going for you. But you got no apothecaries, you got no Heart of the Legion, so you're just going to get cut down anyway by number of attacks. I guess if you pull off a charge and you've got and you pull off Spider of the Legion, maybe you got +3 attacks on the charge with your Ravening Madman. That's pretty swell, but yeah, World Eaters kind of suck. Ultramarines now, they become pseudo-tactical squads. So you take Tactical Squad, they get capped at 10 models now, and they can take a special weapon in every 5 models. So maximum of 2. You're talking a Flamer, a Plasma, or a Melter Gun. It's like a 40k Tactical Squad, sort of. I mean, yeah. Could have its niche uses of pulling out the odd Melter Gun or something, but I don't know. They got Inexorable, which is good. So they got sort of a morale buff here. But you are losing Fury of the Legion, so you're not getting any of that original firepower that the unit should have. So I just don't think they're that great. The Death Guard now. The Death Guard's a bit of a weird choice of unit. So they take a Tactical Squad, and 1 per 5 models can replace their Bolt Gun with an Alchem Flamer. Which sucks because Flamers suck. At least Alchem Flamers have more chance of wounding, but people have so many chances of saving in this edition, and the weapon is still going to get hot on the wielder. It's pretty middling. You also replace Heart of the Legion with the Barbaran Resilience, which will give you a 6-up Feel No Pain roll when you're below 10 models, and it'll give you a 5+ when you're below 5. But your regular tactical squads can take things like Apothecary and just have a constant 5-up, and if they got Heart of the Legion near an objective, they can boost it to a 4-up. So you're trading all of that resilience for adding a couple of flamers to the squad. I don't think that's worth it. Yeah, they're yellow. 1,000 Suns. Their tacticals can become Inductii. You don't get Asphyx bolt guns anymore. You lose Fury of the Legion. And you lose your Minor Arcana Psychic Power, which are not very good anyway, but you lose it. And instead you get a Psychic Power, which gives you Breaching 6+. And if you fail your Psychic check, you take D3 plus wounds from perils, instead of the 1 wound. This is awful. This is red. In fact, this isn't red enough. This needs to be, mega red. Don't do it. Please, you have so much to live for. 1,000 Suns play. And actually, you don't. Your Legion sucks this edition. They're getting you back for the sec meta. Sons of Horus. Sons of Horus. We finally get to another really good Inductii unit. And with Sons of Horus, their Inductii can replace chainsaws with chain axes for 1 point. They get rid of the silly Spider of the Legion rule for Creed of Brutality, which gives the whole unit Rampage 1, Furious Charge 1, when they're within 6 inches of a weapon skill 5 Sons of Horus model. My suggestion is you babysit them with a Moritat, because if you charge a Moritat and these guys in, the enemy squad you charged, they're going to be toughness 3. And they're also going to be strength -1 fighting back against you. Well, if you're Furious Charge and you have a Chain Axe, you're strength 6. You're strength 6 with Rampage. And you charged. You can see where I'm going here. You're going to instant kill the enemy unit, and you're doing it on a budget. That is really, really good. In fact, the Sons of Horus Inductii are some of the best troops choices available to the Sons of Horus. It makes no sense. Maybe it makes all the sense. This was Horus's grand plan all along. I think that's the combo to go, and I think that therefore makes them brilliant. And by babysitting with the Moritat, he is a separate unit that just follows them around. He's not a part of that unit. This is multi-charging, and it's pretty hilarious. Then we get to the Word Bearers. They get Despoiler Squads, and their Despoiler Squads income Inductii, and they replace Heart of the Legion with Empty Vessels. So you roll a d6 after every turn with the unit, and you get to add 1 if the unit destroyed an enemy by sweeping advance in melee, or +1 if you kill the enemy warlord. Good luck achieving this, though, Word Bearers, because you're relying on a stock Despoiler Squad with less buffs to somehow find, hunt down, and kill another unit on the table. Your odds are not great. And if you achieve all of this, you roll that 5+ and you make it the once per turn thing, you get to summon demons, basically, and you take D3 AP- wounds, and you gain Corrupted and Furious Charge. Or you could just buy Corrupted on your standard tactical squads, your standard despoilers, your standard assault squads, whatever, and it's like 25 points a model, per squad, sorry. So what's to be gained here, Word Bearers? This unit sucks and has no place, basically, is my personal opinion. Salamanders. Holy cow, Salamanders keeping up the trend of having decent units. Their despoilers can become Inductii. The Sergeant, as I mentioned earlier with the Space Wolves, is a regular Marine. In fact, he's a veteran Marine, and he's in charge of leading the new guys, and because of this, he is Weapon Skill 5. Because reasons. Doesn't have Artificer Armor, though. That option is still locked for some reason, even though he's a veteran of the Salamanders, the Legion known for Mastercrafted weapons and Artificer Armor, but that's fine, we can deal with that. What he's going to do, though, is have a really good squad, which is 1 per 10 models, gets to take a Dragon's Breath Flamer, or a Melter Gun, hell yeah, and they replace Spite of the Legion with War Gear of Heroes. Now this is where they differ from the Ultramarines. First, you have the Weapon Skill 5 Sergeant, which is better, and even though the Ultramarines can also take 2 Melter Guns, the Ultramarines don't get to reroll ones to hit in melee. That is really, really good. So the Salamanders getting reroll ones to hit and rerolling to wound because of their chainswords, plus having a couple of Cope Melter Guns, yeah, the Salamanders one are actually pretty decent. So green tick on the board finally for the Salamanders. Then we get to the Raven Guard. So Raven Guard, tacticals become Inductii. You replace Heart of the Legion with Unchained Conviction, which is you don't get pinned if you have to make a pinning check, because, tacticals do occasionally get shot at. I mean, the people shooting at you have to deal with more Daithin, Dark Furies, and Deliverers, but they really want to focus on your tactical Inductii. And if they do pin them, then instead of being pinned, you just move 7 inches directly away from the enemy that caused the pinning check. And if you hit the edge of the table, you stop. If you're charging someone and you get pinned, you just stop in place. It's harmless. Adds nothing at all to the Legion, though. So, and you're going to be worse at holding an objective, because instead of being pinned on that objective, you're just going to run away from it. So, not a big fan. But, they're not terrible. So there's that. And lastly, the Alpha Legion. Their tacticals can become Inductii, and they trade Heart of the Legion for Treacherous Lure, which is you're no longer going to be getting that buff, that Feel No Pain buff, so you've got no damage mitigation on them now at all, but you can't be shot in turn 1. Now, here's the thing, nobody's shooting crappy tactical squads in turn 1. If they want first blood, they're going to shoot something like a Rhino, or a single land speed, or something like that, right? Something they know they can kill. There is a niche application, though, and the niche application with this unit would be maybe possibly if you got them on the board and the rest of your army is in reserves in turn 1, because the enemy's not going to shoot you off the table. That's all that saves them from the recycling bin. So, yeah. Anyway, Overall, which legions really win out in the troops department? I think Dark Angels, Space Wolves, Imperial Fists, and the numbers speak for themselves. Also, special accreditation to both the Iron Hands and the Ultramarines, and also the Death Guard. All of those legions do quite well as well in the troops department. I think the Dark Angels and the Imperial Fists having more blue than any other colour on the chart really speaks to how strong those units are for those legions. And just how versatile they are as legions. I still think the Dark Angels are nowhere near as strong as people think they are, because their buffs are quite minimal, but the Dark Angels are a strong legion. I still think the Imperial Fist by far and away a country mile ahead of everyone else, because they don't have to do anything special to leverage it, whereas with the Dark Angels, you do have to do things like think about what hexagammaton you need to take. So there is some thought process in there, but that's all topics to be covered on a later date. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm Mac with the Outer Circle. This is probably an hour-long video at this point, but these are your troops choices in 2.0 for the Legiones Astartes. These are my recommendations of what legions they sync up well with when it comes to stacking your rules together, and what rules don't stack up well. And it's my kind of guide to it. Anyway, if you think I got it completely wrong, write that in the comments below. If you think I got it right, write in the comments below. And feel free to share some of your anecdotal evidence that both supports or dumps on my work in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next episode.